Exciting day today here in London because we're comparing the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K with the Sony FX3. Why have you not guys done this before? Joe and me are gonna do it today. Stay tuned. So first of all, I want to share why we are comparing these two cameras, which is actually a personal test because I want to possibly switch from Blackmagic back to Sony. And why? Because I used to have Sonys and now I'm in need of a second camera. I'm using Blackmagic as a main video camera, but I also need a big camera for vlogging or photography. Now, Blackmagic, as everyone knows, it's a cinema camera, so there's not many vlogging features, no autofocus, no flip screen, no photography features, but the Sony might have what this is missing. Also, I just bought an A7R III by Sony again, and I owned a few lenses by Sony, so that could be a good way for me to switch easily back to this brand. What I'm looking to compare today is portability of the camera, so it has to be light. I'm a travel video maker, so that's very important to me. The workflow, so if I have any problem with the codecs in editing, if it's going to be a pain to edit, you know, that kind of stuff. But also I'm looking for image quality, so it's very hard to beat the quality of Blackmagic, and let's see if the Sony can keep it up. So first time I'm actually holding the FX3. It's pretty cool. It's tiny compared to the Blackmagic, as you might have seen. I've got a 16 to 35 millimeters lens, G Master lens by Sony. Same lens on the Canon. This is the 16 to 35 Mark III. So literally the same lens. You can already see the difference between those two. I definitely prefer the Sony's ones. Dimensions and weight. Well, you can tell the dimensions. The Blackmagic is bigger. It measures 17 centimeters, the widest side, and the Sony is actually 13 only. In terms of weight, that's surprising because the Sony is actually heavier. This is 715 grams, the Blackmagic 680. So they both feature a fan, so no problem with the cooling system. But again, we're gonna test that out as soon as we start shooting. And we talked about the interface and the menu. One of the downsides of Sony, everyone knows, is the menu. So this is a mess. There's so many options in there, and Blackmagic is so simple. So I would definitely recommend to Sony to copy the Blackmagic menu. The interface is just so user-friendly. So really just a few options, the ones you need. Sony, thousands of different things. We're gonna talk about something very important, the price. So Blackmagic 4K comes at 1,100 British pound right now. FX3 4,000, so definitely a big gap right there, and that's something that makes me think if I want to switch between the two. I also want to test and compare some of the frame rates and resolutions. First of all, Blackmagic can film in Full HD at 120 frames per second, but with the crop sensor, so windowed sensor. The FX3 can record the same amount of frames with a full frame. We are close to standstill. The Blackmagic can film in 4K 60 frames per second, and so does the Sony. Having a cropped sensor is not really a great deal, especially if you shoot often in tight spaces, and that's what I do sometimes. I film in studio, so I need a full frame camera. Both the cameras record in 10-bit, so the resolutions we talked about and the frame rates are all in 10-bit, and they both film RAW. Sony FX records in RAW externally at 60 frames per second, 4K, 16-bit. Blackmagic does the same internally at 12-bit. Proxy, that's a plus for the Sony, so you can record smaller files for your video editing workflow. That's going to be very helpful. You can change your sensor, so from full frame, and that's something to keep in mind. FX3 has a full frame. Blackmagic features a 4/3 sensor. 4/3 sensor used with full frames lenses has a crop factor of 1.9 usually, but with the speed booster you can reduce the crop factor to 1.2, 1.3. While on the Sony FX you have a full frame, and with native full frame lenses it matches perfectly. It's very flat, the image is very flat, probably S-Log. We're gonna look into this right now. The Blackmagic has 3 profiles, very easy. Video, extended video, and film. I usually use film, which is very flat nowadays with the new firmware. And the dynamic range as well is different. So on the Sony you've got 15 stops, that's what announced on the website, and the Blackmagic has more or less 13, even though people say more than that. Yeah, it's really great on the Blackmagic anyway. Memory cards. Blackmagic takes CFast cards or SD cards. SD cards also on the FX3, but now we have a new card called Tough Card here, which I think is more expensive than SD cards, so keep that in mind in your total budget at the end. Let's talk about audio video inputs and outputs. The FX comes with this handle, which is also an audio mixer. So you've got 2 full-size XLR input right here and a tiny mixer on the other side. Also you have a mini jack audio, input audio, and 1 output for your earphones, and a full-size HDMI as an output for your monitor. And that's all. On the Blackmagic, you have already on the body a mini XLR input with a mini jack as well. Still talking about audio, we got a mini jack for your earphones, and HDMI, full-size HDMI, and USB-C to update your firmware. So on this side, actually, I prefer the Blackmagic because you've got 2 audio inputs right on the camera rather than carrying that if you had to. Still quite handy. I mean, if you put it on top anyway, the size is not that much. A big feature, especially for the vloggers out there. On Sony, you have the tilting screen, fully articulating screen, so you can just tilt the camera, face yourself. Very handy. Look at me. Autofocus, that's what you want if you're a vlogger, so definitely a better option than Blackmagic. As I do a lot of vlogging, I'm tempted right now. It's pretty cool with full frame lenses. On Blackmagic, unfortunately, you can't do anything. It's a fixed screen with a 4K at least. Then the 6K Pro is a different thing, but on my camera, I can't do anything. I can't see myself, and I can't even tilt the screen for low angles or high angles. So this is definitely a good feature on the Sony. In terms of battery life, we have 20 minutes on the Blackmagic. Horrible. It really goes down in no time. The Sony says to last 90 minutes per battery, so pretty good. Talking about ISO, I know you're interested, guys. The Sony, so native ISO is at 640, which is dual native ISO, 640 and 12,800. So that's when you have the cleanest image in terms of noise. On the Blackmagic, dual native ISO as well, but we start at 400 and the second ISO is 3200. So low light performance, definitely Sony, as you might know, it's the king of low light. Photography feature, that's very important to me as well. I'm one of those content creators that actually have 80% of jobs, video jobs, and then the other 20 is photography jobs, so I still need some photography features. And the FX3 actually gives you 12 megapixels in terms of photos. Blackmagic 4K only 8 megapixels, so I get more resolution on the Sony. And also want to talk about rigging up your camera. As I mentioned, you've got some threads around the FX, so you can mount something already around the camera without actually buying a cage. But with the Blackmagic, you actually need the cage because you only have a thread, 1/4 inch thread on top of the camera. So you need the proper cage to mount microphones or external monitors. That's an interesting start. Oh, yeah, well, Sony is more balanced with the handle on, for example. So on the Blackmagic, I probably would need a V-mount battery at the back to make it more balanced, but that's actually really nice and tiny when you hold it. Yeah, I start to like the handle too. Here we are back in the studio, and now I'm gonna share my thoughts about the two cameras, but also I'm gonna share with you if I'm going to switch. Before I do that, I'm gonna show you the footage I showed you at the beginning of this very video, and I'm gonna reveal the camera that was used to film each individual clip. Let's roll. What do you guys think about the footage then? Could you actually manage to recognize the cameras? It's very hard when you do color correction. I think they look very similar. Anyway, let me know in the comment tabs below what your thoughts are. I'm very curious. And if you come from a Blackmagic background, that's something I'm really interested in hearing. But also if you come from Sony, what do you think about the Blackmagic? Would you switch to Blackmagic instead? Now I'm gonna give you my opinion and my conclusion, and I'm gonna start by the 3 features I mentioned at the beginning of the video. For me, very important were the workflow, image quality and portability. Let's start with the image quality. I love Blackmagic cameras. I love the quality that comes out of it. But to be honest, with the FX3, again, if you match the colors in post-production, you're gonna achieve pretty much the same results. So I couldn't really spot any big difference there. What I noticed is that the Sony FX3 is a bit sharper and more detailed, while the Blackmagic is softer for the cinema look you like. So under that point of view, the Sony always gives me a bit of more digital look still. Something you can adjust again with the post-production and color grading. In terms of workflow and video editing, Blackmagic I think works better. It records in MOV, Apple ProRes. They flow smoothly on my timeline. Even if I play 4K 60 frames per second, I never have any problem with my computer. This Mac is from 2016, so pretty old. Still, it can manage the Apple ProRes files. The codecs from Sony are a bit trickier to play. Also, some of them, I think the high frame rate ones, you can't really play them in your Finder folder. With the Apple ProRes MOV, you can, so you just click on your file, maximize it, and it plays. But with the Sony codecs, you can't preview your files until you import them in Premiere Pro. So that's a pain already, you know, and something that can make me think about it. Honestly, once the files are imported in Premiere, all the frame rates were working fine up to the 4K 100 frames per second. So that's when the computer really couldn't manage the files and it wasn't really running. So you need to wait a few seconds before you can actually see what's going on in your clip, and definitely it's not playing in real time. So workflow wise, I think the Blackmagic still wins. Portability, no contest there. The Sony is smaller. It's not lighter as we mentioned, but it's smaller, and I love how compact it is. Now I'm gonna go quickly through the overall feel and specs and features and what I think about the two cameras. I think overall the Sony is a better camera, to be honest. It gives me so many more options and features compared to the Blackmagic. Of course, that's all related to the kind of job I do. For each job, of course, you guys need to look for the right camera, and you have to be honest with yourself. Even if you want the latest cinema camera, do you really need that camera? So in my opinion, the Sony FX3 would suit more my needs. And once again, as I do a lot of vlogging, things like autofocus is going to help me a lot. Things like the flipping and fully articulated screen, again, that's a plus for me. The FX3 features a lot of recording lights in front of the camera, at the back, on the screen, so you always are aware if the camera is recording. The interface and menu, well, here actually Blackmagic wins. As mentioned during the video, the interface of Sony is horrible. I don't know why they're really improving that. Blackmagic is so clear. I mean, anyone, even if you've never used a camera, you would understand where the things are. You just press it, done, simple. Dynamic range, I couldn't see much of a difference, at least with the tests I've done, but still the Sony gives me 15 stops of dynamic range, while the Blackmagic 13. The Blackmagic gives you a very, very flat image in the picture profile if you use the film mode, and I think that's advisable for heavy color grading process, while the Sony is already more saturated and once again a bit sharper. Talking about low light and ISO, the Sony wins, not contest there either. I think editing the videos in the Blackmagic, you can spot the noise more, and it's amazing how the Sony FX3 can manage low light at 12,800 ISO. That's, I mean, it's probably the best ISO out of the camera as far as I've seen. Sensors and full frame, in my opinion, Sony wins, because again, I come from a Sony background and I've got G-Master lenses over there just waiting for a new Sony camera, you know, so that's important to me. Also, I have a full frame. Depth of field is shallower on the Sony, of course, because I've got the full frame. I can use the camera in tighter spaces because I can grab more image inside my frame. Even though on the Blackmagic I can mount a speed booster that increases my f-stops, still I have a wider angle with the full frame of the Sony. Talking about lenses and mounts, also on the Sony FX, I actually have an adapter for Canon lenses, so I can put the adapter on the Sony and use my 70-200 over there, which is a Canon lens, on my Sony FX3. But I can't do the reverse thing where I use Sony lenses on the Blackmagic, unfortunately. Battery life, Sony's better, 90 minutes for each battery. Blackmagic is rubbish, it's 15 minutes, if that. And the camera is not giving you any warning if the battery shuts down. RAW and 4K, honestly, I'm not shooting 4K very much, neither in RAW, so that's not a big deal for me. I keep filming in Full HD, even for professional work. Sometimes I switch to 4K, but rarely I use the RAW files. Again, for my type of job, if you need heavy color grading, if you're doing cinema, film work, that might be very important to you. Still, you can film in 4K and RAW on either cameras. Stabilization, Blackmagic doesn't come with any stabilization, Sony does. Again, for gimbal work, maybe that's quite helpful. For vlogging, if you're walking around, that can be helpful. So again, Sony plus. Talking about photography, I bought an A7R III lately, so it could be a very easy way for me to have two Sony cameras. Use just the system for the lenses instead of having two different brands. it really helps out. Also in terms of battery, if you're traveling, you don't need two different types of batteries, you don't need two chargers and so on. For photography reasons, actually, I think I'm gonna try also the Sony a7S III because of the viewfinder. The FX3 doesn't feature any viewfinder. I know that could influence the way you rig up your camera, and I really appreciate the threads, the screw threads on the FX3, and I kind of like the handle as well now. But anyway, I think I would buy a cage if I had to buy the Sony FX3. So I don't see a big difference in actually buying a Sony a7S III and rig it up that way. And I know the Sony a7S III doesn't have a fan, but again, from my experience with Sony cameras, I never had any overheating issues in any kind of weather conditions, either in the hottest places I visited in the world. For the final question, am I going to switch? Honestly, I would. The only thing that holds me back is the price. £4,000 for the Sony FX3, £1,000 for the Blackmagic. Nowadays, I can't really afford and I don't have the budget to switch to Sony, to the FX3. It's really a lot of money. Unless I'm gonna sell my Canon lenses, my Sony lenses I don't use, and the Blackmagic. In that way, I could match more or less that budget. But right now, today, I can't do it. If I had the money in my bank account, yes, I would. So once again, I invite you to let me know in the comments tab what you think about the two cameras. If you test them out yourself, what I should do in your opinion. And that's all for this video. I hope it helped out if you are thinking to switch between the two, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Please hit the subscribe button. It's free and it will help me to support my channel and my work. Stay tuned. I'll see you soon.
Seems all good times come and go your way. Child memories fall under rolling.